life. Got this, go chase it, live your life. Enlighten you, let the light shine through. Let more light enlighten you, just see it through.
I'm Melissa Thrasher.
And I'm Lolita Cummings.
Welcome to Enlighten U, Eastern Michigan University's podcast for students. We are excited to bring today's topic to you because it is something you encounter every day you're in class. And watching today's show will help your mental health and overall enjoyment of the college experience.
That's right, Melissa. Today, we're talking about compassionate classrooms, spaces and environments that support you in the ways in which you need it most. And to do that, you know we always bring you the best. Today, we welcome Dr. Ron Flowers. He's acting head of the Department of Leadership and Counseling, and we're welcoming Emerson Storlie. Emma's a graduate student in the Higher Education Student Affairs Program. Welcome to Enlighten U, Emerson and Dr. Flowers.
So welcome to the show, Dr. Ron Flowers and M. Storlie. Nice to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Nice to be here, yeah.
Great. So we're going to start with you, Ron. So your mission right now is to build a culture of caring on campus. And you recently received a grant and some other funds to do that. So tell us, what does that look like at EMU?
Yeah, so we began a little over a year ago. And I can share with you later on some of the personal involvement that I've had that's affected me personally. But I've been in higher education for over 40 years, and I've always been concerned about and very student-centered in my focus. And how can we support students to be successful? As a college football coach, it was what we can do to help those young men and women be successful college students. And that's continued on throughout my career. I work in the Higher Education Student Affairs Program, and we train professionals to work in colleges to support students. But a year ago, we began to look at the growing need for mental health services on campus, that the number of students that are experiencing from moderate to severe anxiety, depression, in some cases suicidal ideations, and it's reached what I would consider to be a crisis level. So what can we do? And I've taken a public health approach. So I approached the provost and said, I want to put together a task force to look at this. I began to talk to some organizations outside of the institution. The Jed Foundation was one in particular. They partner with colleges. There is a fee, so I immediately had to go say, where do I find money for this? And so we applied for the Flynn Foundation grant and received that. And we have been working with the Flynn Foundation since that time. We've put the task force together. In fact, we meet tomorrow. This will be our second meeting of the task force. But it's a 4-year proposition, so it's a long-term commitment. To going through and evaluating what we do offer to students, what we don't offer to students, where are the holes, how can we improve that, how can we just build. And we've taken a public health approach because of this idea that this sort of, you need a village to raise a child, you need a campus village to support college students as they make their way through college. So that's kind of become the foundation. And then a part of that is also a speaker series that we've been funded through the KCP Foundation, where we're bringing speakers in from a variety of groups. We did it this fall, and we'll be continuing to do it here in the spring to make this an ongoing conversation so that the topic of wellness and mental health becomes ubiquitous to the conversation that we have on campus, that it's okay to need support, it's okay to need help. And we do that by talking about it, because that's the one thing people always ask me is, what do you need? And what can we do? And it's like, talk about it.
Yes.
Be open about it.
Yeah.
Remove the stigma that it's okay. So
it's okay.
That's what we're doing. I'm excited about where we're going. I'm overwhelmed by the support we've received by the administration, both Dr. Smith and Provost Longworth. So I think our work is just beginning, but I'm excited about it.
That's good. So talking about this grant, you talked about events, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what will this grant allow the team, the committee that you formed, to do on campus?
So the first thing they're going to do is that gives us access to the mental health network, which exists at the University of Michigan. And that gives us access to a national survey that they've been doing since 2006. So they've collected data from over 500 institutions across the country to give us sort of a read of our campus in terms of what our students' needs are. We'll also be holding focus groups on campus, so that'll help fund that. And we'll also be just simply mapping where different things are on campus, who's connected to whom, how are we communicating this to students. So the first probably 6 months to a year will be a really exhaustive exploration of what are we doing, what do we have, and then what are the needs of our students, and how are they being served, and how do they, then you can talk to a student here about how do I access these, where do I go. And I know myself that sometimes it's very challenging to navigate our website, to find resources. So how do we make that easily accessible to faculty and to our students? And so it'll allow us to do those sort of things. And we get hands-on from the JEDS folks, so they'll be here on campus with us. They've done this at like 450 universities where they partnered with. And they have a great track record, and they'll come in and make recommendations, and they'll work with us on setting up programs. And then we're continuing to work on where are we going to get additional funding, how do we support these things, because they're not free. And so we clearly have to have the resources, but the grant will give us the ability to do that. And then again, at the end of 4 years, we'll go back and do all the focus groups and surveying again to see where have we grown, where do we still need to grow, and how do we make sure the programs that we have and that we've developed are sustainable.
I like that. I like that a lot. This is a huge, impressive project. I love that you're taking this holistic approach with this mental health perspective on it. And the collaborations with all these different organizations is exactly what this needs. So congratulations to you on undertaking this project. Tell me, you said a few minutes ago that there's this backstory from something that was personal that led you to do this. Can you talk about that for just a little bit?
So my son was, and I'll brag about him a little bit because I like to as a dad. He was an All-American wrestler. He was a National Merit Scholar in high school, was a musician, played in a jazz band as a drummer, was a very talented young man, could walk in a room and just light the room up and take it over. He was one of those personalities. But he also suffered from anxiety. And during the summer of his junior year in high school, he began to have panic attacks. I began to suffer from depression. And when he went off to college, he began to self-medicate and use alcohol. And so for the past 10 years, we've been at a personal level engaging with that, where to go, how do we get help, how do we get him into rehabilitation, how do we get him the sort of mental health services that he needs. And we lost him a year ago, September, to mental illness. And so that was sort of the jarring trauma of, as someone who is highly educated, fairly well resourced, I was still going through that experience, lost, and who else would care enough to support him and help him? And so it just became sort of and the interesting thing is I found lots of other people who are in the very same experience. So the people who started the JED Foundation, they lost their son. The folks who start, so all these foundations, then I come to find out there's a backstory that they lost a child to mental illness, and it becomes a commitment that how do I prevent another young person from going through that? How do I prevent another family, because it's a family disease, from experiencing these things? And how do I make this something that we as a community embrace? That we have wonderful clinicians and folks that are working specifically as therapists, but it's not enough. We can't hire enough clinicians for what the needs are. And in addition, oftentimes students may not be at that point in terms of their experiencing mental distress, but they need somebody that cares. And if we can create an environment where we don't stigmatize folks who ask for help, we make it something that we feel comfortable about talking about. If you break your arm, you go see the doctor. If you're hurting, you go seek help. And it may be at various levels. It may be just a chat with your professor after class who expresses concern and care. It may be a referral to a clinician. It may be a variety of things. I've also worked with a place that they're building a residential facility, Garrett's Place. And they just received a $3.5 million grant from the state of Michigan, and they're going to be beginning that facility. But they too, son graduated from the University of Michigan, goes to Washington, D.C. They know he's been struggling, but they thought things were well, and then they lost their son. So there's a community out there. And so whatever we can do to uplift them, to provide support, to let them know that there are people in the community that do care, that will help, and that are concerned.
Yeah, and that they're not alone, right?
Yes, that they're not alone. Because there is a big, you feel like you're alone. And it becomes a family, feels as if they're isolated. In some cases, you can't talk about it to other people in the family. They don't understand why you're not doing enough, or aren't you doing anything? And it's like, it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
it's
Thank
hard.
you so much for sharing that. We appreciate, you doing that. And I love that you are now a part of this unfortunate community. I mean, no one wants to be a member of it, but the actions that you all are taking to try and protect someone else's because you lost yours is admirable. So thank you so much for that. You mentioned classroom a few minutes ago. And that's what you're mainly focused on right now, or what we want to talk about today, compassionate classrooms. I'm going to ask you in a minute too, Em. I'm going to bring you into the conversation, but what does compassion look like in the context of a classroom?
It's as simple as telling students that you care and you're there to talk to them. It can be that simple. It can be providing space for students in the classroom. It can be making sure that you have and you provide to students the information they need to access. But I think the most important thing is to be, or to put your students in a position where they feel comfortable in coming to talk to you. And it can be just simply, I'm willing to talk about it, or and to continue to repeat it class after class. And it doesn't take, faculty aren't trained as therapists, and they're not expected to give diagnosis, but they can listen. They can validate that it's okay. And they can continue to repeat that message and put those messages in their syllabus. And there are other things they can do that you oftentimes as a faculty member pedagogically don't think about, in terms of how do you space out your assignments? Do you make your assignments due at midnight so that you're encouraging students to stay up beyond and getting a good night's sleep? That doesn't mean students, if the assignment's due at 6, won't still stay up till midnight to, students will be students. But if you can do as many things as you possibly can to encourage and support students, and we are even now as a faculty talking about how do we coordinate, why does everybody have to have everything due in the middle of October in the fall? So that's the most stressful time. We know that's the time that our CAPS folks see the most students. And so can we space assignments out? Can we think about those sort of things? And then rethinking about what our purpose is, and if it's learning, then can we take the pressure off students by giving them opportunities to redo and rewrite? So there's a lot of little things you can do pedagogically that can help students and support students in a way that'll take some of the stress off.
Those are excellent ideas. And as a professor, I'm retaining a lot of what you're saying right now, because I didn't realize, honestly, I thought giving them a midnight deadline is great. They like to stay up anyway. It gives them extra time. But I can certainly understand why it's not so great. I'm changing mine for Monday. What does a compassionate classroom look like for you?
I think it's a lot of just understanding that we are not here just as students, but we're here as individuals as well. And understanding that education isn't the only part of the college experience. We also need this space to develop emotionally and mentally as well. And so, like, giving us that space outside and taking into account that, like, while we might seem like we're okay in the classroom, we might have some, like, really bad stuff that's happening outside, and that can affect us academically. So being able to give us grace and having a general understanding that we're not just students is a big part of that, for me at least.
That's important. That's certainly important.
Yeah. When I think about this topic, I think about my healthcare days, because building a culture of caring is sort of enriched in a lot of health organizations' missions. But I also think about, when I think about compassion, just the way you make someone feel.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you're talking about your, experiences, knowing what, students are going through outside of the classroom, what attracted you to this work?
I am a master's student. I'm enrolled in the Higher Education and Student Affairs program. When I was in undergrad, I had a job as an RA, and just having that role as like an RA where I would interact with students on a day-to-day basis, and I would like be there and asking students like, what do you need? It was like a lot of mental health stuff, especially since I went into undergrad during COVID. And I was seeing a lot of like the back end of stuff and the back end of effects of COVID on these students who were from all over the state of Wisconsin, because I did my undergrad at UW Parkside. And just a lot of students would come from very rural areas where they would not have access to great therapists or like counselors or stuff like that. So coming to an undergrad association, that might be their first time that they would have access to things like therapists and free counseling. And then that kind of carried over into my work here as a higher ed student here at Eastern, because I'm currently the graduate assistant for TRIO. And that is also sort of expanded my knowledge of like what it is to extend compassion and empathy towards students.
Yeah, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Good to hear. Have you been in any specific classrooms that you thought were especially compassionate? And if so, what did that look like? What made those classrooms stand apart from others that may not have been, lacking in compassion, but not at that particular level?
Well, so it's actually nice that you asked that, because last semester I got really, really ill and I ended up getting behind on classwork. It made me super anxious because I was like, well, I'm a master's student. But then like I emailed Dr. Flowers and Dr. Beverly, and they were like the most understanding of my situation, because there was just so much happening at once, in addition to the fact that I had moved 8 hours away from home.
Those kinds of reaching out and receiving that kind. So, Ron, let me ask you, as a student who may be struggling in the classroom, I may have a student who's struggling and I may not know. Is there something I can look for, or is there some message that you can share with students for them to make it easier for them to tell me? How do we make that connection so that there is a need for help and a recognition of that need for help, and we can meet there?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I think are really important, and that is, and I've alluded to it a bit, is to create space in your classroom where you can have conversations that are off topic, let's put it that way, that you can just get to know the kids. And I think that's probably one of the most important things, is to get to know your students and spend time talking to them and engaging with them, because number one, that then permits you to figure out when they're off, when they're not being as responsive, when things don't feel right. Behaviors change, attendance changes, there's an abrupt, I'm not had an assignment due, and you don't hear from them. And yeah, those are the sort of the clues. And then it's always asking your students as a group, individually, how are you doing? And I know that most people are inclined to give you the natural refrain, I'm fine. But to follow up with the students and say, just remember, if you're not,
Yes.
I'm here.
Yep.
And if I'm not the one you feel comfortable talking to, I can get you to somebody that you will feel comfortable talking to.
I think that's really important because a lot of students, they really, I mean, first of all, as a professor, I don't want to pry. I care, but I don't want to go too deep because you may not be willing to share with me. You may not be ready. I may not be your person. But what you said, that was, I can give you information for someone else. And that may be the key to unlocking, you know, those feelings, that conversation, because it doesn't have to be me, but it needs to be someone.
Right.
I love that.
And when they, you know, it's late or they've missed a deadline for a paper, then it's more than just the formality of when are we going to make this up and how many points are you going to get. The early questions need to be, is there something happening that you need some help with? What's going on? And I think that's just, again, a constant communication that, and he said it, I'm more than just a student sitting in your classroom. I'm a human being. I'm a person. How's your life going? How are things going? There are times where we always do check-ins at the beginning. So we always have some question, silly, whatever it may be, just to sort of chat and get to know each other. And that's what I mean by creating these spaces in the classroom where you can informally get to know one. And I've loved doing that since I was way back and I was a K-12 school teacher. I mean, getting to know the students. People talk about how do you manage your classroom? Well, you manage your classrooms by building relationships with your students, and then they kind of want to do it for you.
Yes.
And that's really important. But then as you build those relationships, then they have a comfort level and to come talk to you and to visit with you. But there's also being aware of what's going on in the world. When the shooting took place at Michigan State, I had class that night.
Yeah. Oh.
So here we open up class at 5:30, and I'm like, we just can't start class. So can we take a moment first to just all of us pause and take a deep breath and relax?
Yes.
And pause for a moment. And then, is there anybody that needs anything? How are people responding to this? And it's traumatizing, and it's so being aware of things that are going on both on campus and off campus and in students' lives, and you know, helping students, you know, the pandemic and how we help them manage being in virtual environments. Because that makes it harder to build those personal relationships because you don't have that time as students stroll into your class. I call them kids. Everybody gets critical because they're young adults, and it's like at my age. But yeah, as they're coming into class. But again, I always show up even if I'm online. I open up the shell and the video feed well before the students are supposed to be at class. So I'm there, and I always hang out until the last student wants to leave because I'm trying to recreate that in-person experience. And the same thing with that. They take breaks, and I ask them for 5 minutes, and then I'll be back online if you want to come talk to me about something else, and those sort of things. So again, it's just creating all these different spaces and thinking about different ways that you can create openings for students to feel comfortable. And then to the degree that a faculty member feels comfortable is making themselves vulnerable themselves at times. I was shook up by the Michigan State shooting, and that concerned me. And so it was good for us to talk about it. There were angry students. There were students that didn't understand why this keeps happening. There were others that were sort of like, it's just, these things are just a matter of time. They weren't shocked. And it's like, that's a sad commentary on the world that we live in. But I think that's important. And to the degree that a faculty member feels comfortable, to again, make themselves feel vulnerable, to let the students know what they're experiencing. And another part of it is for faculty to help students figure out how to manage things.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's so we try to, you know, I try to talk about them organizing their reading schedules and when to read and how to read things. And, you know, I always tell the story of I have students that I've seen them read articles that I've had, and as I stroll up and down, I see the whole thing has been like yellow highlighted. I mean, it's like everything. And it's like, we're not reading things here. I'm not testing you on it. You're not going to take a true false test. This is how you read this. This is how you need to get through the material. This is kind of a schedule that will help you manage your classes, those sort of things. So any of those things you can do to help students manage their lives, manage their experiences. And then I go back to getting to know students, their circumstances and their situations. And we've got at Eastern an extremely diverse student body. that come from, and that's one of the wonderful things about Eastern. But it also means we need to be much more aware of students that are taking care of ill parents, single parents, students that didn't come from high schools that were well-resourced. I mean, and if we're inviting them into our university to join us as scholars, then we need to be willing to find the kind of support that they deserve to be successful.
Yep. And I think one of the advantages, well, we have a lot of advantages, but one of the advantages at EMU is that we have smaller classroom sizes. So being able, like you said, to get to know the students and create like those, I'm thinking silos, but those spaces, right, where you can get to know students, I think that's a great thing. So it's all about resources and just being there. And it makes me think about an article I read just last night. It was about a student. She was talking about her story, and she recently lost someone, and she had mentioned it to her professor. And the professor responded and just said, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't have any answers for you. I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry. And the student, that's all she needed to hear. She was fine with that. She said, just that I knew my professor was there for me and shared those words, I felt it was okay. So I totally know that just that communication does make a difference. So I do.
And I know faculty will struggle because faculty are fixers.
Yeah.
I mean, we go into it because and it's like, it's okay to say, I don't know.
Yes.
It's okay to say, I don't know what to say, but I feel your pain and I'm here for you. And I've had a number of students in the last year or so, knowing what happened and I went through, that have called me when a parent has taken their own life and said, what do I do? And it's like, all right, let's talk. Let's spend some time.
That's exactly what you do. We don't always have the answers, but you let them know that you care and that you'll help them through whatever it is, and whatever resources you have, then you will help to share with them. And let me ask you a question. Or were you about to say something?
I was about to just kind of add on to Dr. Flowers. I think being able to show that vulnerability with your students will then foster more of that compassion that we want to see in that classroom, because we're able to connect more to our faculty members and our staff members then.
So you all want to see your faculty members not as strong leaders and necessarily in the taking over the classroom, but vulnerable and being part of that community with you is important.
Yeah, especially since like a lot of the time in my undergrad, at least, we would always just see them as like these people in power positions, but we wouldn't really see the human side of things. And so it would be hard to connect with them, and then we wouldn't seek them out when we did need help, when we did have stuff that was happening like outside of the classroom. We just didn't feel connected in a way.
That's really important. Let me ask you about another part of that relationship, because we've been talking about professors and students and compassionate classrooms. How does that filter down with compassion between students, with your classmates? If you're in a compassionate classroom that, a professor like Dr. Flowers has set up, that is this community of caring, does that filter down to your interactions with your classmates?
I think it does, because it makes me feel like, even though it's just my relationship with my professor, that would be kind of setting it up as a model for what I could do outside of the classroom, and then that would help me kind of extend more compassion and empathy, not just between other students, but between other individuals, just in general.
So it just keeps flowing.
So it just keeps going.
I love that. Dr. Flowers, a minute ago, you said, Eastern is a very diverse campus. We bring everyone here, so we really need to take care of them. How does compassion interact with diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom?
Well, first of all, mental health is not a one-size-fits-all. A variety of communities that students deal with were raised in families that mental health is talked about in different ways. And I think we have to be very culturally responsive. And that's part of getting to know your students and their circumstances and situations and valuing them. And as I talk to students, and when I was doing much more involved in teacher preparation, about be careful of your own assumptions, that you build assumptions about where you're at, and you can have blinders to seeing other ways that may cause you to make assumptions about what's the right thing to do. And you kind of have to let go of that. And you have to respect students for who they are and value that. But I don't think, and I say that we have a task force on mental health, and I always say, and equity. And we're working very closely with our DEI task force because it is connected. Because we need to think about, and that's why the foundations we've brought in, the Steve Foundation, which will be our Steve Fund, which we'll be bringing here in the spring semester, focus specifically on mental health and marginalized populations on your campus. Because again, to help our faculty gain the perspective, and not just faculty, we have staff that are participating because they're frontline and engaging with students on a daily basis and can recognize when there may be issues or situations. But yeah, thinking in terms of how do we do with the multiplicity of identities that students bring to the campus and families and experiences is extremely important, and we need to be constantly thinking about them, and we need to be thinking about, how do we make sure we have, when we do get into going to see a therapist or going to see a counseling, how do we make sure we have counselors that look like our students, so that there's a comfort level there, and gender identity, and those are all things that are important and things we need to think about. And then I think us as faculty then need to be thinking about, well, where do those professionals come from? And what role do we have as professionals, as those who prepare educators or student affairs professionals, that we're recruiting, that we're bringing in and supporting a diverse student body? Because they'll be the individuals that go out and serve in student affairs roles, that serve in counseling roles, that serve as therapists. And so it's all interconnected. That's why the work we're doing is so much of a public health focus, and it's a public community focus, because it takes a community to be involved and committed to that. So yeah, we can't do this work, and I've said it repeatedly to the provost and the president, this has to be a unified effort. We have to be making sure that what we're looking at and how we're evaluating it through the task force is in a manner that, are we serving all of our students equitably? Are we providing them the same kind of opportunities? Are there other things? We were talking about engaging in a study about Black males tend to not seek help.
Right.
So it was like, well, can we figure out a way to help them seek help? And then as a couple of the faculty members were talking about that research project, and it was like, maybe we have this backwards, because the literature does tell us that Black males are more likely to seek somebody in their own community, in their faith community, than it may be a professional counselor. And it's like, well, maybe instead of trying to fix them, maybe we should be providing resources to the people that they will seek help from. And so if their first choice to seek help when they have an emotional problem or they're stressed out, is somebody in their faith community, can we help provide those in the faith community with the resources to provide the kind of mental health support?
I am
those
blown
sort of things.
away I am just blown away by the work that you guys are doing.
It's
It
tremendous.
is so comprehensive,
Yeah.
and I think it's probably the most important thing that we are doing on this campus right now is what you're doing, because there truly is a mental health crisis in this country, and you guys are looking at it from every angle in a way in which I've never seen. Thank you so much for doing that.
I know.
Ongoing process.
Yes.
It's timely, though. It's so timely. And, like Lolita said, it's just tremendous work. And I recall you mentioning that the grant is about, 4 years? You have 4 years? And I know there are a lot of outcomes that you want to see. And I know you want this to be sustainable even after the 4 years. Ideally, what are the outcomes? What do you want to see EMU succeed in doing after the 4 years?
The first thing is, I would like our conversation about mental health and well-being, what it means to to think in terms of wellness to become a ubiquitous thing on campus, that it's part of the image. I mean, we do it, and I come out of the field of athletics. I mean, we market and we tag ourselves with symbols and those sort of things. I mean, I'm already thinking in terms of how can we as an institution make this something that we, as we look at the things that are around, as we see those things, they mean something. We have the big "You Belong" banner, but how do we make it a part of the everyday conversation on the campus between administrators, staff, and faculty, and for one another? I mean, so this isn't just about students. We have faculty and caregivers that also need the same sort of support. And how are we doing that and providing that for them? And then we can truly tell students as they come to Eastern. I mean, thinking about, M came 8 hours from here. He's far away from home. What kind of support will he need? We have international students who, I mean, and again, we don't think about things, but the holidays come. And if I'm from out of where do I go? Can I stay in the dorms? And we know one of the biggest issues is loneliness, is feeling isolated. And so how do we help students not feel isolated? How do we help faculty feel not isolated, sort of thing. So,
yeah. If I could ask you, if there is one, if I gave you the option only have one piece of a classroom that made it feel compassionate, that made it feel welcoming and empathetic, what would that be? So if a professor was thinking about just making one change today, or if a student needed just one change today, what would it be? And if it wasn't in the classroom, what advice would you give to a student to maybe suggest that to their instructor?
I think just being more accommodating, and rather than having a student who has accommodations or a letter of accommodations, just being accommodating to everyone.
I love that.
I'm planning on presenting at the GRC specifically about the systemic issues around learning disabilities and accommodations in the classrooms. Just because I've seen that is also a big contributor to mental health issues around college students, because they have to advocate for themselves 24/7. And so just overall providing accommodations to everyone so you don't have to advocate for yourself 24/7. That's just going to lead to burnout and more just unneeded stress.
Okay. All right. So students ask for accommodations. Take the professor aside or instructor aside, maybe meet in your office and one-on-one have this conversation and just ask, because what's the harm in asking, right?
Yeah.
And most of the professors that I know anyway, they're here because they want to help. Most often they don't help because they don't know that it's needed, and so that conversation is needed. What would you say, Ryan?
Be willing to be as vulnerable as you feel comfortable being, and just continually reiterating to students that you're here for them, you care, and that you're here to provide them with the resources. Just a constant conversation, so that then it just becomes real.
Yeah. And it's a whole different relationship.
Yes.
Whole different relationship.
I mean, it's one thing at the beginning of the class to read your syllabus and say, I care about you.
Right.
But if every time you walk into class, it's like, so how's everybody's day?
Yep.
Do we have any thoughts? I had a horrible day today. And I just want to let you know that. So if I appear to be a little quick with things, please understand.
I love
And that's as vulnerable as you can get till you're being honest with students. So I think that's probably the most important thing. And then understanding, I think for faculty and staff, is you do not have to have the answer.
Yes.
And I think that scares faculty sometimes when it's like, oh, I don't know, I'm not a counselor. I don't know if well, you don't have to have the answer.
Don't have to.
You just say, I care. I'm here to listen.
Yep.
I can point you in the right direction. Here's access to the resources. And we make those easily available to students.
And what are some of those resources that you would recommend?
So there's CAPS. We have an Active Mind group on campus, which is a student organization that provides mental health support. So CAPS is obviously our mental health services, and students get 12 free visits to see a counselor every semester. So that's available to them.
I love that you mentioned active minds, because we don't refer to that very often, but they are still active.
Right.
And that's a great peer-to-peer group where they help one another. That's good.
The National Alliance of Mental Illness of Washtenaw County is the organization I'm speaking.
See, I knew it comes
They also have a student group here on campus that meets regularly for students of color.
Oh.
And so there are other resources. There are resources over at the University of Michigan that are accessible to our students. And so there are a number of places that they can go.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you have some events coming up.
Yes.
So we definitely want to talk about the events coming up. Did you say both for students and faculty?
Yes.
Oh, good. Can you talk about them?
So yes, on February 19th, we have two professors, two doctors who their specialization is mental health and multicultural dimensions of mental health, and specifically looking at students of color on campus and their support. They'll be here February 19th. They'll be speaking as part of our Brown Bag series. So that'll be from 12:15 to 1:30 in 203 Porter, which is the big theater in the Porter building. And that's open to everybody. So, and food is provided. So we have sack lunches for that event. And then later in the afternoon from 3 to 5 o'clock, they'll actually be holding a workshop for faculty that how can they incorporate pedagogical practices in their classrooms that are culturally responsive and support the mental health of students of color.
Well, we have certainly appreciated you being there. Melissa and I say that we learn so much on the show, and we do, but more importantly, the students learn and the students benefit from it. And again, I am blown away by the work that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's part of the, let's make this an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more we can talk about it, the more we feel comfortable, and it's easy to talk about, and it's okay to talk about.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Lolita, Dr. Ron Flowers' story was so powerful, and I cannot wait to see what EMU does to create a culture of caring.
Oh my goodness, you're so right. Everything that they have is such a comprehensive plan, and I know it's going to help so many people. But I'm also so impressed with the way he's using his grief to help others so that they don't have to go through the devastation that he and his family have gone through. It's unimaginable.
Unimaginable. So that's all we have for today. Just try to remember to be kind to others, and don't forget to include yourself.
I am so glad you said that, Melissa, because so many times we forget about ourselves. You know, I really like what Maya Angelou said when she said, my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with passion and compassion and humor and some style. Y'all have fun and y'all be good. And we'll see you again next month. But in the meantime, don't forget to like us, to share us, to subscribe, so that every month when the show comes out, you'll automatically get it. You all be good.